Shalom. In this video I want to go into a problem I see in the Orthodox community and how Reform has dealt with that problem. I see a lot of bad mouthing of Reform by Orthodox and they just don't understand it. A lot of the times they're bad mouthing classical Reform and have no idea that the Reform you're most likely to encounter today is not classical Reform. And they're generally clueless about Reform. So I want to go into one issue of halakha and how I think that the Reform movement answers the problem better than the Orthodox movement. And the problem is this. 2,000 years ago there was a Sanhedrin. It had existed from the time of Moses and it had the authority to interpret the law. Because of the Romans, the Sanhedrin's no more. There is no court which is legally binding upon all of Jewry. Now, of course, in the time of the Sanhedrin, all Jews didn't agree then either. You had the Pharisees, you had the Sadducees, you had the Essenes. In the Middle Ages, you had the Sephardim, you had the Ashkenazi, you've got the Mizrahim. From community to community, you had differences. On Passover, the Sephardim might eat a meal of rice and beans, maybe roast up a lamb. The Ashkenazi threw out the rice and beans, along with all their chametz. Now, what did the average Jew do when he had a question about the law? He was no longer in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. So what did he do? He went to his rabbi, and the rabbi would give a ruling that was binding upon him. But what's the problem with that? The problem with that is this is that rabbi's opinion. Opinions differ. You no longer had a Sanhedrin to adapt the law to modern times. So how did the Orthodox solve this? They said it's binding. You're not permitted to ask a different rabbi. Why? Because if you got an opinion from one rabbi you didn't like, you'd go to another rabbi and ask them until you got an opinion you liked. Because they knew these were opinions and opinions differ. But they were still trying to concentrate authority in the hands of the rabbinate. But who is responsible for you following the law? Is it the rabbinate? If you do wrong, do you go up on Yom Kippur and said, God, this is a rabbi you gave me, and he made a mistake? No, I am unworthy. I've done wrong. I've done this. I've done that. Me, I'm responsible. So, who does authority lie with in the interpretation? When it comes to what I do, the authority lies with me. I am responsible. I can go to rabbis and learn. I can ask them about pertinent things in the Talmud. But I have to use my reason and intellect to find out how this fits. To find out how the law, which was once adapted to modern times by the Sanhedrin, we have no more Sanhedrin, so how does that law adapt to modern times? How does it fit? How do I apply it to my day-to-day life? I'm responsible for finding that out. I'm responsible for finding out how the sages arrived at answers. I'm responsible for finding out the way they reasoned out things, the conclusions they came to, what tradition says. And I'm responsible for carrying on that continuum to find out how it applies now. Now, I went to my local Orthodox rabbi. I said, Rabbi, how do I not round the corners of my head? And he said, well, you keep sideburns. You keep a little bit of a sideburn. Okay. What about using a razor on my face? Well, you use an electric razor. I said, are there any qualifications for this electric razor? As long as it's got a foil, you'll be okay. Now, I know that other rabbis will tell me something different there. They will take the razor apart. They will see if the blade cuts or if it acts like scissors. You know, I know these things. So, because I know these things, I can ask him, get his opinion on it. And then knowing these things, I can come to my own conclusion. Reform expects more from me than Orthodox Judaism does. It requires more of me. Because I can't just accept an opinion on the mitzvot, I have to find out how they apply to the best of my ability. I have to research. And I may go to a rabbi who's done a lot of this research, but I can't just ask his opinion. I have to see what he's considered, how he came to his conclusion. I have to do the work. And in the end, if a mitzvah isn't easy, if it's not convenient, then tough. That's not the Reform position, that you don't do a mitzvah because it's inconvenient. The Reform position is that you study long and hard and you find out how these mitzvot apply today. That's the Reform position. This is not classical Reform. This is a Reform movement today. One that requires you to use your head, to use your reasoning, to use your brain, to find out what God expects from you. Shalom. Lahit Rod.